Are we gonna have a Wizzy like?
Well, you just did it. So.
There's nothing for it anymore. Okay, first of all, everyone welcome. My name is Elvis.
Tim,
Rob.
Awesome. And if this is your first time, this is TrickFactory Customs. Before we get started, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, all of that good stuff. We're a fabrication shop here in Coquitlam, BC. And if this is your first time watching, we do a lot of more other content. So we'll just put a bureau of the kind of stuff we do. And so we just want to come together maybe once a week. I don't know. And just answer some questions, I guess, that have been brought up a lot of times. And so the first one is probably in the title of videos. How do people get started as fabricators, automotive fabricators, car builders? Because a lot of people want to get started, but it feels like there's a lot of barriers for entry. There's a lot of random stuff that people might have to deal with on the way to becoming better fabricators. And so I just wanted us to talk about that pretty much. So yeah.
Well, yeah.
So do you want to start?
I can, because I've answered this question many times. I'm sure you've probably seen through our social media.
Yeah.
And it's like I have more suggestions to prevent failure rather than the actual nuts and bolts of how to become an automotive fabricator, because there's no real courses for it.
Okay.
So like some of the pitfalls that a lot of people do is like right before my opinion is they should start honing some of their skills, but like partition it. Like I need to learn how to weld first.
Actually, if you speak up, I don't want to cut you off there, but I just wanted to, people that don't know exactly maybe how you guys got started, because I think that would be important for everyone to know. So before we get into how to be a fabricator, one of the questions is, how did you guys get started in the fabrication world?
I was poor.
I had big, grand visions of what I wanted, but I couldn't afford it. Nobody didn't make it for me, so.
Yeah, so basically it was like all these other young guys that want to get into it, I had little projects all the time that I wanted to do. So then you'd go to like your local welding shop or a little fab shop. Like some people are lucky enough to have uncles or grandpas or whatever, brothers that do it. Mm-hmm. I never really had that. Well, I did, but this wasn't really a viable career at that time. People didn't think it was, especially my dad. Like he's like, you can't do that. That's, so you have to go do one of those standard, what's considered a successful career. So I wasn't, even though I had it available to me because my grandfather was an amazing fabricator and he had all the tools and all that kind of stuff, I was never really, I was pushed away from it. Okay. Like it wasn't encouraged, because that was like, you're just going to be another one of us dummies kind of thing. So
yeah.
I would have to go to like local fabrication shops, and then you're broke and you're a kid and you're like, hey, I want this done. And it was almost a nuisance to them. So everything was like $100, $100. And like, I made like $7 an hour. So it was like, I had to try to learn how to do that stuff myself. So things progressed, and like our story is kind of a little bit unique in that sense. Is like we finally got to a point where it's like, we just got to learn how to do this stuff ourselves.
Yeah.
So me and him went to BCIT, which is like our local trade school, and signed up for everything. Like literally everything. So we signed up for
like we spent like probably a solid afternoon just like looking at like the brochure board of programs. And BCIT,
like,
okay,
we took everything.
We're gonna take this. We're gonna take this. We're gonna need to do all these. Okay, so you do this. I'll do this.
Well, like we signed up for like machining and aircraft structures because we wanted to be able to do composites and like fabrication and welding, and like that was very much the formula. It's like whatever you get into, you can teach me. Whatever I get into, I'll teach you.
That's pretty awesome.
So, and then we ended up basically both getting accepted for welding first.
Okay.
So then I started welding, like doing industrial welding for like machinery and conveyor systems, like really heavy stuff that didn't apply to automotive industry whatsoever. Yeah. It's actually polar opposite. And then I had to go away for whatever reason, and then Rob filled in for me. And then I think shortly after I got into welding, he got into welding.
Okay.
And then we welded just out of necessity as a job to get paid.
Wow.
And then we were lucky enough that in the fab shop that we worked in, the machinist was like an old school, like literal, like actual World War II machinist.
Okay.
And then there's another gentleman there that was like, he worked on the oil rigs, he worked in Abu Dhabi, like, he's like the Mr. Belvedere of fabrication, like literally fabricated all over the world.
Wow.
So he had this entire wealth of knowledge. And then, so while you're there welding, then you show a certain aptitude, they'd start getting us building little projects, and then it's like, hey, you guys are already here, you're already doing these things, why don't you go to school and get your fabrication ticket? So then we worked through fabrication ticket, and then we started building a little bit more things and more stuff, and then you get more proficient, and like, and even still, it was like side projects. And I tell these kids, I'm sure you've seen, like, build something that doesn't matter, like build a table, fix a fence, like get proficient.
Like something you can learn at.
Yeah, get proficient at your abilities before you try to apply it to your car. Like make sure you're decent, because now you're gonna chop a hole in your car and not be able to fix it. And then we've all seen dead cars. We have people bring up and you're like, what happened here? Like, so like hone your skills before you try to do that. And then the crossover is like, because you can't go to hot rod school. I think they tried it a couple times in the States and it didn't really work out. But then you have to do, like we must have 50 videos, like VHS tapes of just trying to learn stuff, and books, and this is like pre-YouTube. And even the problem with YouTube is a lot of this stuff, like these people shouldn't be teaching people. So it's like you're getting half of it, and it almost makes it even more frustrating. So there's a lot of trial and error to doing this. So it's like we went to school and learned those things, became proficient, and then slowly transitioned it into automotive.
Oh, okay.
Even though we were on the same path as far as like technical skill sets, and because we worked at the same industrial place, we both, you know, learned from that World War II machinist guy. We both really looked up to another one of the guys there was the lead fabricator, and he was a Boeing aircraft, you know, fabricator. And so he was more into like that technical side of things, and we both looked up to these guys, and we asked them lots of questions, and we did all those things. And you know, on the side, we were working on our own things, like you said, build coffee tables, build just whatever.
So it wasn't even really related to cars.
No,
it
was like matter. It was like you had to get to work, so you couldn't go chopping up your car. And like the other side of it is like to do a car is like you need a lot of space and you need a lot of tools. So it's like it's easy things to do and get proficient at. And like again, you probably see in a lot of my response to these kids, like we were lucky with these two particular fellows that trained us, is not so much because you can go off on your own and learn how to weld good because it's a process and you can get repetitive. But if there was like one takeaway from this particular guy is like, he taught me how to think, like think a project through and how to measure it. So you're not stumbling, you're not going backwards. So it's like, you almost build it in your head first so that, so like a lot of times this particular guy, like he would lay out all his drawings and he would spend almost an entire day just looking at drawings. Whereas you get a lot of these other guys that just want to rush in and start banging metal. They're cutting metal, like look at this guy, like, sorry.
No, it's fine. We'll just bleep it out. So the normal way.
It's like, look at this guy. He's over here being lazy. Like, we're over here. We're hammering it out. We're doing big things. But then their stuff looked like junk. Like, it was fast, and it was like, it looked like they were doing stuff, but his stuff was like very meticulous and well thought out. And he ended up always finishing before them because he would cut all these pieces. He would do all these things. So like, that's probably the single biggest thing is learning how to like measure properly. Like measuring is a huge thing. Like it's a massive thing. I know you struggle with it.
So if you guys don't know, I have a Datsun 1982 Datsun 280 ZX for Canadians. But yeah, it's interesting because we were when I made my Datsun, I had no experience, no idea what I was doing. And a lot of times I'm just like, I look at it, I'm like, that looks right about okay. And so we were making a new front splitter for the Datsun. And because the other one I made it out of wood. Well, this is like another episode. We'll talk about that. Thing. But we were making it out of alley board, out of old signboard material. And it was interesting because none of my measurements were equal on either side.
You were freestyling.
Yeah, I was freestyling. We're like, okay, this kind of looks okay now.
Yeah, it looks good.
Which has its place. Like, I mean, it happens sometimes. So, because we've encountered things where you make it perfectly symmetrical, but if what you're doing it to isn't perfectly symmetrical, then it messes with your eyes. So then you gotta kind of adjust. So it does have its place, but most of the time you try to get it as close as you can.
Yeah. And so like there's just a few questions that I kind of laid out. And so I'm just gonna go through some of them. Do I need to go to school for it? So if I want to get, like you guys did go to school, so Rob, do you?
Well, I mean, I would say no.
Okay.
You don't need to go to school. If you have the affinity to try your hardest and just learn. I mean, now, like Tim was touching on the fact that YouTube is a thing.
Yeah.
You can go to the school of YouTube now, but like at the same time, you might learn some sort of janky ways, but then there's actually a lot of really great content out there on YouTube as well. Like I actually use it a lot.
Yeah.
To sort of see how other people have done some things, like take some references and like sort of just refresh my mind. Like, anyways, you don't have to go to school.
Okay.
If you are like the type to want to build, then you're gonna build regardless if you go to school or not. Like that, I mean, right down in the core fundamentals, like we were both those types of people anyways. Like both of us, like we talked about this before, like when we were kids, we used to take everything apart all the time and then try to put it back together.
Yeah.
How did this thing work? I don't know.
And then you figure out two bolts,
of course your parents
Yeah.
would like they'd be upset at you. You'd be like, oh, you took it. Why'd you take the VCR apart? The VCR was a video thing.
Yeah.
Anyways, why'd
Yeah.
you take that apart?
It's changed, like the dynamics changed a lot, because before you could afford, like I was lucky enough that I saw more or less my hero, which I meant through racing, and it was like, he was almost like a mentor to me, but he could afford to have me milling around his shop, and I would sweep up and I would clean up and all those type of stuff. So you're always watching and learning. So if you, like you said, if you had an affinity for it and you're there and you didn't cost the money. So whereas now, like our overhead and our production flow is so quick that I can't really afford to give up that time, because like we get hit up all the time. Like I'll work for free, like I'll come but it's not actually free. It costs me time, and at the level we're doing things now, I just can't afford it. Like I would love to be able to take that super energetic kid under my wing and show him all the stuff, but in our era, it was a lot easier because the overhead and the expectations and all those things weren't quite the same. It was more of like a hobby thing. It was like a side business, but now it's like a legitimate functioning business, and we have to keep going. So it's like I feel for some of these kids because they don't have that opportunity. And even me, I can't give it to them. Like we have a fella that I showed you this morning that like he's ready to jump on a plane. And he's like, I'll work for free, man. I'll sleep in the shop. I'll do whatever I need to do. And I can appreciate
that's
that
awesome.
enthusiasm. But right now, like with my own workload and my own stresses, I don't have the time to give it to him. Like I can't. Like I appreciate it. Like that's the guy that you want to put time into.
Yeah.
But you just can't. Like it's hard.
I mean, that level of passion.
So those guys are at a disadvantage now. So you have to go do it on your own and show that you bring something, at least at a base level that I can keep you around. Like you have to invest in yourself and put your own time in.
Yeah.
So it's hard. Like I think it's harder for these guys now, but the enthusiasm for it is, even because this was almost like a subset before. It wasn't even like those were hot rod guys and those were chopper guys. Like everybody had their own little thing, but now it's so mainstream. And it's so much harder for them to get into it. Because those old guys before, they just wanted company. Like, yeah, man, come on, let's have some beers. Come hang out at the shop. Like, because I don't want to be here doing this by myself. Whereas now it's like, you got to get out of here. I got work to do. Like, so I think it's even harder for some of these kids. Everybody wants to do it, but there's just, their dads don't do it. They're, it's way different now. It's totally different. You can't fix your own car now. So they don't even get the most basic like vehicle maintenance. Like
that's
before,
so true.
like it's, what are you gonna do? You open the hood, you're like,
I didn't even know I'm looking at.
They don't even let you check your own oil anymore.
I was actually, there was
There's
like
no
this thing
dipstick.
that was going around a few weeks ago or months ago, but it's like back then in the owner's manual, they will show you how to do this, how to
Adjust the
change
valves,
cars,
like all this
how
kind
to
of
do all
stuff.
these
Like,
things. These days, they tell you not to heat the batteries.
Yeah, don't drink the battery content. Like that shouldn't be a thing.
It's very interesting.
Why is that a thing?
Yeah. And so we've touched on YouTube and all that. While that is a great learning experience, it still doesn't give you the full.
There's a lot of
thing.
holes in it.
Like,
I tend to watch it to find like little gems, but I'm looking for very specific. Like, how did they do that? Like, I'm missing something, but I've already exhausted all the options available to me
Before,
and then I start to look like there's got to be something I'm missing. So I use it very much for that. But if you don't already have that foundation, you're just like, you might as be watching brain surgery. Like I don't have any of that stuff. Like it's.
So, but would you say that, for example, the way I still haven't really gotten started, but the way like I did, I was like, okay, I want to build this car. I just went to go and started buying. I already had what I want to do in my mind.
Yeah.
But because I didn't have anyone around me that even would show me how to do it, and it was just YouTube.
That's why I say like you might have jumped in a little too soon on your car, but like even just familiarizing yourself with all those tools and becoming proficient with them on the other things before you dive into your car. So you're not practicing on your car. Like you could practice on lots of things, like make your mom a table, make this, make that. Like there's lots of opportunity just to make stuff. But most people don't want to do it until they can do it to something crazy. Like how many kids, even in the interim, has been in the shop that they just want to do the end product.
Yeah.
Then once they get a feel for how much time and effort actually goes into it, then they just disappear.
Yeah.
Like that makes it frustrating for us to invest in somebody because they've skipped so many steps. They just want to be there for that final assembly and then the hype.
Yeah.
So I mean, half these cars take us a couple years to build, and then they come together in like a month, and that's the part they want to be there for. But that's again YouTube teaches. First TV did that, and then now YouTube, at the pace in which that they have to produce content, it makes it unrealistic. Like it makes it, like some YouTube stuff is very genuine and very regimented, and it's like you can follow, and then you start to get an understanding. And I think that's what we're trying to do with ours, is to even educate our customers at how much time and effort goes into these projects, because they don't get it. They've been watching TV, they're excited, and we joke about it all the time, how like Monday morning everyone's charged up because they watched all the car shows on Sunday, and then they think that I didn't sleep. Like they talk to me on Friday, they call me Monday like, hey, where are we at with my project? Like, I didn't work on your project. Like, I got a family life, and Sundays I don't work, so there's been 2 hours since I talked to you last. Like, but they get excited, they watch the shows, they do all the things, and then that's usually where it ends though. They don't understand how much time and effort it is. So, like we've literally had to go so far as like, we had one customer, we're like, here's the tools, here's the materials, should be easy, we'll be over here. And he got so offended and so upset that he came to me, he's like, I've never been so offended. And I'm like, well, how do you think it feels to have your abilities, time and effort that's easy for him, but it's not easy for you? So there's like this disconnect, and it was like, it's like, oh, it's easy. It's easy for me because I put the time and effort in. I have the tools, I have the place, and I have the knowledge. Yeah. And you think I should just bang it out in 3 hours? And
and ease of completion is only relative to your skill. It still takes a long time.
And some
surprisingly enough, like some things take freaking really, really long time to accomplish.
We've had situations like that where projects will come back, and we've had employees where it's like, you come back, you're like, why did you do this? So it was taking too long. You're like, taking too long based on what? Like, have you ever done this before? Do you actually know how long it takes? There's some things that are just super labor intensive, and there's no cheats. But then that's usually when corners start getting cut, and like, you look and like, this is going to be 12 hours, like, but everybody wants to do it in 2. And then that's when you start seeing the stuff that we're seeing a lot of.
And so, like, with being at a fab shop, for example, there's body guys, there's the electric, then there's the like fab guys that do like a lot of welding, all of that stuff. And so, if, for example, I just want at home, I'm just like, okay, can I just be a generalist, like do it all? Sometimes we bring in people that's like, okay, and so when do you know when to stop? So I don't have these skills at this time, so I can only do so much, because you've kind of talked to me about that a little bit too.
I mean, and I think that just comes down to like what your experience level is. Like, if for us as a business, scheduling is a big part of it too. Like when we first started TrickFactory, it was just the 2 of us. So we had to do everything, all the things, like straight into final paint, wet sand, buffed, graphic, like the whole thing, everything, right? And like there was a point when you're like, okay, I want to take what we do to another level, but we don't have time to be able to create that and do this and do that. So you're like, well, what's the best thing I could possibly do? Find someone else that's really, really great at what they do, and if they fit your aesthetic and they you're vibing, bring them on.
But that's also being honest with yourself.
That's
like,
so true.
Because there's like a lot of things, like we've always done it where we'll try it ourselves first. So then it helps you, like we can do it, like we can do everything. I've wired every one of these bikes, I've wired cars, I've done all this stuff, but it's not something that I want to do. And for me to do it really well, it's a bit of a process. But I have an understanding with it. So then with it comes value. So I know what our wiring guy, it's like, I know the process, I know how hard it is, I know how long it should take, and I know what it takes to do it really well. So like learning how to do all those things yourself and struggling through brings you a respect for the process. And I think that's like in our spot specifically, I think everybody kind of has respect for their individual trade that they do, and then we bring it all together pretty well. Whereas I don't think any one trade is really more valuable than another, because like that's a lot of, you'll see, like you go to car shows and you'll see what that person specializes in. Like they've done an amazing amount of metal work. It looks amazing. Like you're just like, man, the hours. And then it's like rainbow spaghetti thrown on the top. And you're like, this guy should have admitted his and got, because that, and then like got our guy Steve to wire it, and it would have took it all the way. But right away I dismiss it. I'm like, this thing is going to be a nightmare. I don't want anything to do with this thing. And then paint and body's the same. Like you can do a tremendous amount of beautiful metal work and you put some hack on it. So it's like learning the respect for all those different trades is like, and it's, like I say, you have to admit to yourself that like there's somebody better at me than this, and then I have to make the decision that that's the guy. So if you're going to have that arrogance and you want to do it all yourself, you'll probably never find success, because it's one of our strong points, I think, is that we have all these things going on simultaneously, so we can get things, like they come to completion faster. So then you see people like, oh, you guys are killing it. Like we're not really killing it. It's just we have all these things happening at the same time. We have interior happening. We have wiring happening. We have paint and body happening. Rob's making stuff. I'm doing whatever I do. And it's like then it all comes together pretty quickly. And that's where the hype comes from. Whereas a lot of these places, it's like, it's got to go over here for 3 months, and it's got to go over here for a year, and then we got to go see this guy. So it loses momentum and people lose enthusiasm. And then having to manage all those different things as an owner of a vehicle, it gets overwhelming, and then it just dies on the vine. And then it's like, then they got to take a year off and recover from all this ridiculous expense, and then they're like, I'm bringing it back. And by the time you finish a car, it's been to 4 different shops, and like it's wild. And then there's just too many variables. Like you work to your finances, you work to your abilities, because you get criticism.
I didn't think about that.
Like you get criticism all the time. It's like, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do this? And ultimately, if I took all of that criticism and I put it in a pile and filtered it all out, we'd all be driving Le Mans cars, all of us. Like we'd literally all have LMP cars, which I would love to do, 100%. But I mean, I've been lucky in the past that I've been able to build some crazy shit, but it's like, it's expensive. It's crazy expensive. And even though there's a time and place, like I can't be doing this all day, every day. I'd love to be able to do it for, a job. And there is guys that are on YouTube that are lucky enough to do it, but we're just not there yet. So it's like, sometimes the only reason a project stalls out is because I don't have the money. That's it. And a lot of the time it's just, I don't have the time. Because if I'm over here working on my car and you're waiting on your car, you're going to be pissed off at me.
It's very true.
And I mean, you see it lots. Like lots of shops have cars, and like this guy's out at every meet. He's driving around showing off his car, and then there's somebody that's like, what about my car, man? Like you've had my car for 2 years. Like
very interesting.
And I mean, we even have situations like that where it's like you're trying to do all these crazy things for these guys, but then the time just starts building up. Like, and then finally you just got to call it and get it done. Like it's like. This thing, everybody thinks it came out of nowhere and happened overnight, but I was building and gathering parts for this car for like 7 years.
For those of you that don't know what he's talking about, there's the Evil sitting back there, and it is glorious. So,
but even that one, it was like, we didn't execute it until our abilities were in a place that we could do it properly. So it's like being honest with yourself, and it's like waiting till that point and then doing it. Because you can take
that's good.
You can take your car apart 100%. Like I'm going to build this, and then you're like, oh, I've never built a roll cage before. Damn, like what do I need for that? Like I need this pipe in there. Oh shit, all the tubing is going to cost me $2,000. And people want to buy fun stuff. They'll buy wheels. They'll buy all this crazy shit.
The car
and then once you got to start buying materials, that's not fun. And then you got to start putting in all this work that's not fun. it's like that's when the project dies. It's like, awesome, I spent 10 grand on wheels and that's it. But
the dream is,
you should have spent all that money on materials and time first and then got the wheels last. You know what I mean?
And develop that skill set required. You know,
that's pretty good.
And that's kind of what my Z car is a representation of.
Yes.
You know, that's like an elevation of my own personal skills.
So good.
Right?
It's so true.
And so that translates into every single project that comes after that car, right? Every one of our customer cars, you know, our own personal cars, if we're fortunate enough to be able to build more for ourselves. But like that is like a push, like we are pushing yourself to become greater.
But even in that
do
time,
some
you're
uncomfortable
still,
things.
even in that time, like his Z car is a perfect example. Even though people think it's stalled out and you're not working on it, he's actively working on it every day because you're learning suspension geometry and engineering and why does it need to be where it was, where does this need to go. So it's like you're working on it all the time.
The amount of work that's going into the car,
and then the execution part, like I say, is easy.
Yeah,
it's like piece
because
of cake.
you've already planned it out.
But it's like there's tons of work that goes into it, sort of
Before you
behind the
even-
scenes, and it's like even if that work is like getting your finances in place, getting the timing right, and then learning why you're doing what you need to do, because like you'll put yourself under a huge amount of emotional trauma if you put something out into the world that's not right. They're going to tell you. They will tell you,
and that is terrifying. You know, that will almost paralyze you from even doing anything.
And you also know if it's not right, like because you're the one that built it. You're like, oh shoot, this is not.
And we've made mistakes, and I've had to go back and change things. But and like even at the time, in order to get to a certain place, like you have to make like concessions. Like, okay, well, this is all I can do for this now. When I have more time and opportunity, maybe more money or whatever it is, we can come back to that and correct it. So it's like there's always a give and take someplace. Like we'd all love to just be able to, you know, but it's not reality. Or in the interim, when you do something and you do get that criticism from people, and then they're like, hey, why didn't you do this? You're like, well, I don't actually know why I didn't do that.
I'm not exactly sure.
So I'm going to investigate
good
that
question.
now. And then you go and do a bunch of investigation, and you're like, oh, this would be way better. I'm going to change that. I'm going to correct it. Because like we've seen tons of cars that have like literally blown up on YouTube. And then once they have to start getting used for the purpose that the original owner intended, but maybe wasn't as educated as far as he needed to be, they almost have to redo the car. By the time they're done and it's doing what it's intended, what the owner's original intention was, is like the car's evolved like, you know,
so true.
Way beyond what it was.
Yeah, so one thing that I want to kind of like just make clear is, I also want to ask if it's a thing, is don't get ahead of yourself, because it's like I have a LS swap Jag, and it's like initially I was just gonna do an engine swap. It was just gonna be, I thought it was gonna be easy, and then I got into it. I'm like, oh shoot, I'm gonna have to figure out everything. And it's interesting when you also figure out, you're like, yeah, no one else is gonna figure this out for you. You have to do it yourself. And when I didn't have those skills, I'm like, I still have to figure it out.
Right.
But also another thing that I shouldn't have done, one of the things that I figured is like, why did I just went in and just started chopping wires, cutting. I'm just
cheap,
like,
and it's free.
Get this out.
I'll do it later. I'll figure it out. It's just $20 here and there. I'm just gonna, and now I'm like, oh shoot, I created way more work for myself because the whole car is completely cut apart, and I'm like, oh my god.
But we've all done it. Like the easy part and the fun part is that initial stage of like you're high on potential and all these type of things, and then you just like very much like we had this conversation. It's like, this is $20, this is $8, this is $10. I'm gonna get brand new everything. But then you've created yourself so much extra work. Whereas if you'd have just got it functioning, then you can piece those out one at a time, and then you maintain the momentum, and it's like you're always doing something. But when you do it and you hack all this stuff out, then it just becomes so overwhelming, and you're just like, and you make so many mistakes and create so much extra expense that takes away from the whole thing. But it feels great when you're doing it, because we don't necessarily associate that going away and learning as part of the build. Like going and reading a book, going learning what I should and shouldn't do. Like that's not part of your build. It's like, unless your hands on, sparks flying, pieces coming off, like
slow motion.
It's like I'm not building anything, but it's like that's where you make all your mistakes. Like it's educating yourself and all this stuff is like, it's a lot of process and it's a lot of time, and that's where they always fail. I failed. I think I chopped up 3 cars and never.
Wow.
Now I still got parts for them.
Wow.
Because I did the same thing. It's free.
Yeah.
You're home. You're making big moves. Like this
Might
is
as
gonna be
well,
crazy.
yeah.
I'm gonna cut this rust out. Next thing you know, you got a car with 14 holes in it, and no way to put it back in.
Yeah, I'm going through that those tiers every day now. But yeah, like it's been, I don't know, almost what, an hour? No, it's been like 35 minutes. But we're still gonna continue all of this stuff. But just to summarize, don't get ahead of yourself.
Yeah, don't get it.
Do something else, or you can get the tools, but do something else before you, like, I don't know, get into the car and start chopping everything.
Yeah, just break it into little manageable pieces, like
manageable
one part at a
pieces,
time,
that's
and
the
you'll
word,
gain experience, and you'll gain, like it'll be so much more manageable. It's like you don't do anything else like that. Like you wouldn't go buy like a crazy stove and all this kind of stuff just to cook spaghetti. Like you just start small, man.
Yeah.
Like maybe borrow one and see if it's something you have an aptitude for, or get some information from somebody else. But like, because so many people like, hey, what kind of welder do you guys got? You're like, do you really need an $8,000 welder, $10,000 welder? You probably don't, because you don't even know how to weld.
Yeah.
And then to come and like, when I learned how to weld, it was very different than now. Like now you can watch tons of YouTube videos, but we went to school for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week for a year to learn how to weld. Yeah. So you can't really expect to emulate or do what I can do in a week. Like, I want to build a crazy thing. It takes time. It takes
so true.
Yeah.
So I mean, you can go to Metal Supermarket and buy crop pieces and just practice and just it takes a lot of time, and generally it's like people's first welds is their best weld. Yeah. Because they're not overthinking it, they're not in their head, they're not trying to be a superstar. So and then the next one is because they think they're good. But you're only good because I set the machine up for you. Yeah. It was like I turn all the dials off, now let's see what you can do.
That's so true.
So just getting ahead of yourself is what kills all these projects. And setting unrealistic deadlines. Like to build a car yourself is probably at home, like I used to read a lot of like hot rod magazines and all that kind of stuff, and they always put build times in there, and like on average those build times were like 5 to 8 years. So it's not unrealistic because it's a huge expense. Like it's expensive, but now it's like if you're not banging something out every month, you suck. Yeah, it's not realistic. Right? Like it's not realistic
according to social media.
Yeah, it's so true. With YouTube now, YouTube, by the way, is also a great what's it called, resource. Like there's a lot of stuff I feel like that I've learned, and like you can also learn, but you just have to also filter that out too, because there's also a lot of garbage.
There's a lot of garbage, a lot of holes, a lot of unrealistic expectations, and the reality of it is like until you see that stuff in person, you just don't, like, you gotta, a lot of it, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors out there.
Just so much hype.
And a lot of stuff that doesn't function, and then it just fades away, and they're on to the next thing. Yeah. And it's, you gotta see this stuff go down the road.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that we talked about earlier was, I'm just trying to summarize, was have a list or prep what you're doing before. Like, I know with you, if you're doing, for example, like bodywork, wide body stuff, something that you've started using and you've also got me into is sketching it. It's an iPad, like just get an iPad and just sketch, I don't know, a body panel or something that you want to do.
It's probably one of my favorite tools right now, and I'm obsessed, right?
Oh my.
Basic iPad, free sketchbook program, get yourself a pencil, an Apple pencil I use, and
learn the difference between like shading, just start basic drawing stuff, and just start drawing to see.
But like, and it just helps you sort of see where you're going, right? It's just a good idea. Yeah. But like, it's any kind of project, if you chip away a little tiny bit at a time, if you don't overwhelm yourself with something by cutting the whole car apart, if you just do a little tiny bit at a time, your enthusiasm for the project will stay high, and you will allow yourself to get to the end. Eventually you will get to the end. You will have chipped away all the different things required to finish it, and you'll stay in it. Small victories are worth chasing.
That's
for sure.
So true. Yeah, you don't have to do everything at once. Like you can just do something and you're like, okay, this is fine for now. And then you get better and you keep on evolving.
I like having like
growing.
Like a project. I'll set it out. Like I'll have like my wish list of things and my want list. My wish and I need. I need to have these things, so let's check the boxes on all those, get those done, and work towards what my wish list things
are. That's good. That's a good point right there. So before we end, anything else? Oh,
we got so much.
Speaking of, there's gonna be a lot more. Like, there's a lot. So if you have any questions or any comments as to what stuff we can talk about in the future, leave a comment in the description below. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Instagram, TikTok, everything, if you want to see more of the builds that we do here. And with that said, that's also good. Speaking of tools, we're going to be doing I think we're going to start like a tool Tuesday.
Yeah,
so
sure.
you guys are going to be showing us, because also we talked about using tools. Like, a lot of people don't know how to use tools, and people also think you need the most expensive thing to do a lot of stuff. So that's also a different episode. We're going to save it for later.
Save it for later.
So with that said, that's pretty much it, guys. Thank you all so much for watching this video, and we will catch you guys later. Bye.